Welcome all to our virtual speaker series. My name is Lütge and I'm Professor of Business Ethics at the Technical University of Munich and the Director of the Institute for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence. With our speaker series, the TUM Institute for Ethics in AI invites experts from all over the world to talk about ethics and governance of AI. These events serve as an important platform for sharing new research and exchanging knowledge. Since our launch in 2019, we were already able to run 27 speaker series events. And today, we are delighted to have with us Dragos Tudorache, member of the European Parliament and Vice President of the Renew Europe Group, who is talking today about governance, the key to success in regulating AI. Let me say a few more words about our distinguished guest speaker. He is the chair of the Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in the Digital Age and the LIBE Rapporteur on the AI Act. And he sits on the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, and the Subcommittee on Security and Defense. Also, he is in the European Parliament's Delegation for Relations with the United States. Mr. Tudorache began his career in 1997 as a judge in Romania. Between 2000 and 2005, he built and led the legal departments at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and the UN missions in Kosovo. After working on justice and anti-corruption at the European Commission representation in Romania, supporting the country's EU accession, he joined the Commission as an official and subsequently qualified for leadership roles in EU institutions. During the European migration crisis, Mr. Tudorache was entrusted with leading the coordination and strategy unit in DG Home, the European Commission's Directorate General for Migration and Home Affairs, until he joined the Romanian government led by Dacian Cioloș. Between 2015 and 2017, he served as Prime Minister's Chancellery, Minister of Communications and for the Digital Society, and Minister of Interior. He was elected to the European Parliament in 2019, and his current interests there include security and defense, artificial intelligence and new technologies, transatlantic issues, the Republic of Moldova, and internal affairs. So today we will start now with the presentation and then open the floor to all of your questions and comments. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Dragos, the floor is yours.
Many thanks to the Institute for organizing this event and for inviting me to participate in it. And many thanks for taking the time to read my biography. Not sure it was needed, but you might ask yourself, why is it that I've pretty much worked almost all my life in justice and home affairs area, and all of a sudden I'm responsible and have focused so much in this mandate of Parliament on AI. And the response to that question leads very much and is very much connected to the first point that I wanted to make in my presentation about why is it all of a sudden that the European Union has considered regulating AI. And I would say for the very same reason that I was drawn to this topic and decided from the start of this mandate to actually connect the threads of what were my political interests, transatlanticism, security, defense, home affairs, justice, and basically the setup of the states themselves. Why? Because I thought and I saw how this technology, how AI, how its impact on our societies and our democracies is becoming so significant that actually we needed to give it the proper consideration in terms of how we want to signpost its development into the future. And as it happened, in a way, from the very start, from the inaugural speech of President von der Leyen in front of us, European Parliament in 2019, the Commission itself announced as a priority for the first 100 days that actually they will produce a proposal for a horizontal regulation of artificial intelligence. That's when, in a way, this amazing adventure has started. Amazing because I do think that it's quite what we're doing at European Union level, not only that we are the first in the world, that we are approaching this and we are attempting to provide a horizontal set of rules for artificial intelligence, but I think it's amazing also because it is something that is going to influence the digital transformation for the decades to come. Because, again, whether we like it or not, whether we are prepared to recognize it or not, whether it's something that we have paid attention to or not, AI is the driver for the key transformations in our societies and economies. Everything from value chains and the way value chains are going to evolve in the decades to come as part of our economies, whether we talk about products or services, the value of the AI that is embedded in those products and services is going to overcome often the actual physical value of that product or service, all the way again to the impact on human interaction, on the interaction between individuals and the states and the public authorities, to again the health of our democracies. All of that will be in a way influence driven by the way AI is going to interact with the physical world, and therefore again I think it was timely, it was necessary, it was, I would say, also geopolitically important that we would be considering putting rules in place. And since I mentioned geopolitics, I really want to also touch upon this as part of the more broader context that led to this proposal, because we also looked at European level, and the leadership at European level also looked at what is happening, of course, around us. Technology is becoming an important driver of the global competition, of the global race for competitiveness or even supremacy in the minds of some of the global actors out there. And is also something that is very much linked to the way we understand the values that are underpinning our societies. And it has become, and it's not a choice that we made ourselves, us, I would dare say, the free world, the democracies of the world, but we could not also not be blinded to the fact that others were instrumentalizing technology, and AI as one of the key technologies, to basically impose certain models of how technology is running societies. And if we look at the model that the Chinese government and PCR has been using to embed AI in the way the society works and the society is being controlled, because that is how they understand interaction between the state and society, then clearly a similar thinking, a similar approach had to be taken by the like-minded partners that understand the values that are underpinning our democracies, to make sure that, again, technology, the standards of developing this technology is something that remains in sync with our values and with our democracy. So again, this is a conversation and this is an attempt of regulating that is also having a growing geopolitical significance. And that is why we also have to be, and this is a key message that I always want to pass in events like this, we have to be, and I would dare say, unlike we were in previous attempts to be first with regulation, we have to be much more mindful of the other like-minded partners out there. We have to rethink the way we play out the Brussels effect. The mere fact that we would be the first regulating AI should not be sufficient. We will need in parallel to also actively engage with like-minded partners out there to make sure that there is a common understanding, a common base to the rules that we will put in place, even if we will have a different approach to legislation. And this is what is happening with, let's say, our key partner across the Atlantic, with the US. If you look at the Trade and Technology Council, this process that has been launched and has been running and has been, I would dare say, the engine of our interaction on the transatlantic route for the past 2 years, AI is an integral part of that conversation and of that process, in order to ensure that convergence, in order to ensure that alignment of values, of principles, of common understanding of how we build this technology, while recognizing that we, because of our different legal traditions and environments, we will be not having the same approach to legislation. the US side accepts and understands the fact that we will be legislating AI, a legislation that will also impact American companies. We understand that, again, for political, for legal tradition reasons, there won't be a similar AI Act or AI bill in Congress anytime soon, but at least we are trying to align on values, we're trying to align on principles, and then a very important work will have to be done at the level of standards, so that we also align technical standards. And if we do that, then we would be ensuring as much as possible a level playing field and a common basis for how AI rules look like, so that companies, whether on one side of the Atlantic or the other, or wanting to play out the market of each other, would have a common basis on which to work. So again, this work of convergence that needs to be done in parallel with us legislating, this sort of AI diplomacy, as I like to call it, is absolutely paramount for the success that we will have in rolling out and making sure that the model that we will produce with our rules is indeed going to be a model that would be, in a way, embraced, integrated by others into how they will themselves be approaching AI governance. And this is certainly something that we should not only be doing along the transatlantic route. We have to do that also with other like-minded countries in the world, South Korea, China, Australia, Japan, Canada. So all those that, again, understand, going back to what I was saying earlier, understand values in the same way as we do. So therefore, we will have to work with them in the various international settings where we have this opportunity, whether it's OECD, whether it's G7, whether it's G20, whether it's, so all those other frameworks in which we sit at the same table, in which we discuss technology at the same table, and then, very importantly, that alignment of standards that I was mentioning, relevant for the transatlantic relationship, is something that would certainly be relevant also at a more global level. So the approach that we need to take in international standard setting bodies, where over the last decades, China, for example, has crept in and has quite a strong influence. Again, there will be, I would dare say, a competition on models for setting standards at the global level, because again, the interests of everyone to impose their vision of the world in how standards look like for this important technology will certainly be there. And therefore, this alignment of democracies that think alike is key. Now, few words on where we are with the process. So I've outlined a bit the importance of this legislation and why we arrived at the point where we said we absolutely have to put an AI Act on the table. Then the Commission did that. They have actually, again, listened to a political message that we sent as Parliament as early as 2019. We were the ones that asked the Commission, don't rush, don't bring in legislation in the first 100 days, as President von der Leyen had initially announced, because we thought that it was very mindful of the reality out there for the Commission to first launch a thorough consultation process with stakeholders, which is what they did via the white paper in February 2020. And that white paper and that process basically opened up the conversation to all interested parties out there who contributed. There was quite a flurry of activity, I remember back then, and there were many contributions that actually, I think, enriched the thinking of the Commission and helped it build a better proposal that was much better anchored into the expectations of stakeholders out there. And then the proposal came, and us, in the meantime, here in Parliament, had established this special committee that I had the honor of chairing, with very much the understanding, and I would dare say the vision, of preparing ourselves as regulators for the moment when this text will come on our tables. We understood that as legislators, we need to be better equipped to understand the complexities of such a technology, so that we would be better off when negotiating, when preparing these texts, when interacting with the Council on this, and with the expertise of the Commission. And I think that IEDA, the special committee, has actually helped us in doing that. I don't think we've ever been, in a way, that prepared in Parliament to deal with this kind of legislation. And it also allowed us to again, go much deeper in understanding the impact, the implications of AI in pretty much all walks of life. We organize hearings on many topics, again, so that we can grasp the complexity of this technology and what it means for us. And then once the text is on the table, we have started preparing for it. We had a record number of amendments arriving from members, over 3,000, which again is a testimony to how important this is for all political families. And it is important because, again, behind us as politicians, we have constituencies who basically express their concerns, who express their expectations, and therefore, again, very much of the work that we're doing here, very much of the amendments that are being supported by colleagues, no matter whether they sit on the right or on the left side of the aisle in Parliament, they are echoes of the society. They are echoes of the sometimes misconceptions, sometimes urban legends, sometimes genuine concerns, but basically the way society right now understands and looks at this technology, understands and looks at the impact of this technology on their lives, whether they look at it with hope for progress and for facilitation and for more powerful tools in our economies and our society, or whether they look with apprehension because they think that either their jobs will be disappearing, or that their jobs will completely transform, and therefore their skills would no longer match that new model of the job that they have, or whether they fear the impact on their privacy or on their individual rights, or they fear their freedom of making choices, whether political choices or other type of personal related choices. So again, all of this impact that artificial intelligence has on us as individuals, on our communities and societies, are things that are coming through the views and opinions expressed. And for us as politicians here in Parliament, I think our duty of care is to listen to all of that and to try to capture in the work we do, which is, of course, making the work quite complex and tedious. That is why we are a bit behind schedule right now. Initially, our plan was to finish our negotiations in Parliament by the end of this year, so that we would actually have a position of Parliament adopted by the end of this year, and therefore align with the Council that, as you might or might know, 2 days ago adopted their final position. So the Council has done its work in parallel, as it works, for those of you that are familiar with the EU processes. So we've worked separately. The Council 2 days ago adopted their common position, so they are ready for negotiations with us. Now we have to be at rendezvous and finish our work. As I said, we are a bit behind schedule, but right now we are convinced that by the end of the third trimester in 2023, by March, we will have a vote in plenary, and therefore by end of March, we'll start trilogues. I'm confident if I look at the outcome in the Council, because we now don't need to second guess. We have the actual position adopted in the Council, so we can more or less look and see where we appear to be already aligned or close to alignment or convergence, and where we would anticipate tougher political battles, let's say. So it actually gives me quite, I think, enough reasons of optimism. I think there are many points on which I already see, if not convergence, at least sufficient alignment to actually have confidence that in negotiations it will not take long before we would find common ground. And I speak of definition, very important, and which initially appeared to be a big ideological debate. It still is here in Parliament, but if I look at where we are heading is a place which is not very far from where the Council has fixed its definition, which means that I think we will find common ground without a lot of difficulty. On governance, again, I see that the Council has also amended quite significantly the initial proposal of the Commission, recognizing that if you allow implementation and enforcement to be done only at national level, you would create 27 different silos, and therefore really undermine the objective of allowing AI to represent an engine for growth and economic development, and you would only do that if the market would be open to everyone in the same way and not be put in a national silo. So I see the Council has gone in that direction as well. We here in Parliament are also amending quite significantly the initial Commission proposal in the direction of strengthening governance at the European level, recognizing that there is this need for uniformity. There will be still national components, there will be national regulators, because proximity between the actors in the AI game, whether they are developers or whether they are end users, is still important. Also because of the innovation driver effect that we want to achieve through sandboxes, which are also a very important part of the governance of AI. And those sandboxes need to be as granular, as close to the companies as possible. I'm speaking to maybe a good part of the audience is German. You have a federal system. For example, one of the inputs that have come from our German colleagues is that they would not want only sandboxes at the national level. Basically, they will also be looking for the possibility to establish sandboxes at the Länder level or even at municipal level. And this is something that we, at least in Parliament, in our proposal, and there is a majority for that already, we are actually prescribing in the legislation that it is actually encouraged, not only that it is mandatory to have at least one in each member state, but it is encouraged that sandboxes would be established at the regional level, even at municipal level. Why? Again, because we believe in this need for proximity between the regulator and the companies, the developers or the users of AI, and that would actually achieve what remains the fundamental core element of this text, which is trustworthiness. The whole human centricity, which the Commission is putting at the heart of the text, builds around the element of trust. If we want AI to be developed, if we want AI to be accepted by the users, whether they are individuals or whether they are companies, if we want it to be taken up by public sectors, by companies as tools of the trade, as tools of their internal functioning, then we need trust. And trust comes also from knowing that there are safeguards in place, comes from the fact that you know that there are principles and rules that are being respected in an environment that is driven by certainty, by precise rules and standards, and that's in fact what we are trying to achieve. Maybe one last point. I'm looking at the time, and I don't want to be. I want to leave time for questions as well. To speak a bit on some of the points where I do see that we will be having, let's say, more of an ideological tension with the Council based on their position and where we are right now. There will be a big discussion on prohibited practices. If you have become aware a bit with the content of the proposal, you know that the proposal is built as a risk-based horizontal legislation, very much resembling the product safety legislation, but basically it's built on the philosophy of the pyramid of risk. At the tip of the pyramid, you have a finite small number of applications that we consider to be so detrimental to our values that they have to be prohibited expressly by legislation. So that's the tip of the pyramid, and that is captured in Article 5 of the regulation. So that's where you have the prohibited practices. Then you have a second floor of the pyramid with a high risk, and in the legislation they are contained in an annex. Why an annex? Because it is seen as a living document, an annex which would be adapted based on how technology will also evolve. There might be use cases that we haven't thought of right now, but that will grow to become high risk, and therefore they can be added later. Or to the contrary, there might be applications that we thought right now they would be high risk, but will prove in practice not to be, and therefore some of them might be subtracted from there. So anyway, that is why you have the list of high risk applications in an annex. And then the rest of the pyramid, which is basically, in the estimation of the Commission, 85 to 90% of all AI out there, which is basically remaining regulation free even after the adoption of this text. All the other AI out there that does not impact in any way those values that I was mentioning at the beginning. So looking at this pyramid of risk again, and coming back to the points of contention that I can anticipate that are already right now in our debate in Parliament are stirring up quite a lot of ideological discussions. As I said, definition was one, but I think we're already closing and also being not far from the Council. But then Article 5, this one on the prohibited practices, will be certainly a battleground. Number one, because of the provision on biometric identification in public spaces real time, which is something that appears to be now a majority building up in Parliament that will be supporting and voting for a ban. So most likely, as Parliament, we will finish and adopt our position with a ban on biometrics, and we already know the Council will come a bit from the other end, not far from where the Commission also proposed it, with an exception for law enforcement, which is something that at least for now in Parliament there is no support for, and I anticipate that there will be tension in the negotiations. A second point there in Article 5 comes from the fact that we in Parliament are adding predictive policing as a use case, as an application of AI that is considered to be so, again, impactful on our rights that is to be prohibited, something that the Council does not have in its list, so therefore I also anticipate that they will be clashing. Then, interestingly enough, and I don't want to qualify it, but the Council has chosen to run away from trying to say anything about general purpose AI, and also from trying to provide a definition with some criteria for high risk. And in its final position adopted 2 days ago, they are throwing the ball on both of these issues back to the Commission by saying that the Commission will come with implementing acts later on, both as far as the general purpose AI is concerned, as well as high risk. Again, I don't want to qualify that. It's true that it's not simple, and we know it ourselves. We also are not finding easy to have an agreement on how to approach general purpose. There are two big schools of thought in here, like they are, I think, in the debate out there as well. Maybe you have been debating that in the Institute also, I'm sure. But running away from saying anything, I don't think is the solution, and neither do I think that passing the ball to the Commission and letting them deal with that in an implementing act, which is a different kind of a norm where there is very little political input, I don't think it's the solution either. The choices that we will make in the way we would be regulating the responsibility for general purpose is a political issue. Is an issue where I think we need to be expressing ourselves politically, ideologically. There are important choices to be made in the way we recognize or not a responsibility for those that are developing general models of AI. And same thing goes for how you would be defining criteria for risk, so that you are narrowing down and bringing necessary precision, I think, and legal clarity to the definitions of high risk applications, so that you don't capture under too broad of an umbrella applications and use cases that maybe should not be there. So I think, again, we do have a duty to provide clarity, to provide this precision in the definitions, and again, letting it for later, implementing acts, at least we in Parliament don't think it's the right way to do it. So therefore, we will be, even if it takes us a little bit longer, but we will be providing definitions for these two, and also some criteria for how that should be playing out. And then maybe last point to make in terms of the positions and the negotiations and the points which I consider to be hot is conformity assessments. Who should be doing the conformity assessments? Should we, let's say, create a new market for companies specializing in conformity assessments by saying that you leave this to third parties to do conformity assessments, or should we follow the logic that the Commission initially proposed with self assessments? I'm a liberal politician, and therefore I'm very much also looking at this text as a driver for economic development, for innovation, for growth. And for me, already the burdens that we have, not from this text necessarily, but from other pieces of legislation that we have at European or at national level, the burdens we put on startups, on small companies, even on medium companies, is such that often they consider leaving Europe to go to US and other corners because they simply cannot deal with. I just come now this morning. I had a meeting with 40 startup entrepreneurs. They all told me exactly the same thing. It's not that they don't recognize out of the narrative that I was also saying earlier, they don't recognize that, yes, from a societal point of view, you need these rules, you need these safeguards, and so forth. But they say, listen, practically down to earth, where we live, in the real world, in the real economy, if you come and ask me to do yet another assessment on top of the other, I don't know how many million of rules that I have to comply, it's simply too much. And therefore, it is inevitable that I would be looking over the fence out there and see, well, it's still pioneering mode in the US. So I can actually still go there because it's so much easier to innovate. And if we lose sight of this reality in how we'll be devising these rules and how we will need to make sure that we are, again, as sharp, as precise in our definitions so that we really target only those use cases that need indeed safeguards in place, and not putting unnecessary red tape and paperwork on companies and applications that should not be considered high risk. Again, then we will be missing tremendously the target, the scope for this text. And at least I am going to fight all the way to the end of this negotiation to make sure that that doesn't happen. So again, this sort of conformity process and how that would be measured is something that at least I'm hoping to build a majority so that we stay on the idea of self-assessment on as little effort and as little burden as possible. So that's pretty much where we stand in terms of calendar. Expect by end of 2023 to have this legislation in place. We will see exactly how much of a buffer then we will allow. Again, my approach would be to leave as big of a buffer for the actual entry into force of the rules so that there is time to set up the authority, there is time to set up the sandboxes, there is time for the players out there to understand the legislation, to understand what the requirements will be, to prepare for them if needed, so that when the actual entry into force comes in, all the support framework that we are envisaging in the text would be there. Again, from the governance to the advisory boards that would function as a place for stakeholders to be bringing their reality checks to us, all the way to sandboxes. So all of this support framework should be in place again to make sure that this legislation is not something that will all of a sudden block innovation in Europe. So Christoph, thank you very much again for this occasion. Thank you very much for the patience of listening to me so far. I'll stop here and grateful and happy to answer to any questions that the audience might have.
Thank you very much, Dragos, for these very valuable insights. Also for me, and it's always different when you hear from the people themselves who are occupied with the act, and if you just look at the documents and it's I mean, here we are also dealing, as you're saying, with values and with general atmospheric things about what will we see coming out of this, and what will be the result of these long processes eventually. And so yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to hear that. We have some questions now. I wanted to say, yes, we have also been occupied at our institute with similar discussions. Actually, we have another event coming up beginning of next week with several speakers from other parts of the world who have been looking at the current draft and will put it in the context of what they believe is important in terms of AI governance. So here's a question. I think you covered this to some extent, but I'll read it. When we discuss EU AI Act and its impacts with companies, we usually see both opinions, those that support or demand the AI Act to have more clarity and those that try to get around its impacts. How do you perceive the feedbacks received from industry in this regard?
To be honest, I started off by expecting hostility all around. Mm-hmm. Having listened already to reactions and feedback about other pieces of legislation that we had come up with, starting with GDPR onwards, including with the DMA and DSA, I somehow thought that with the AI Act again, all the companies that were demanding to see me would come and say, "Oh my God, what did you do? It's horrible. We hate it, and what are you doing to us?" It hasn't really been that way, and I would actually say that the overall reaction has been one of understanding, not excitement. Certainly, no one likes new rules. That's clear. But I found that there was a much deeper understanding of the impact of AI, recognizing that impact, and also recognizing the need for rules than I expected. Of course, and I find it natural, companies want precision. They want certainty. They say, okay, we understand that you'll come with some rules. But again, number one, make sure that they are actually targeted and exactly where it is needed. And to my surprise, speaking of general purpose, I actually found developers, very serious developers of general purpose models that have come themselves and said, listen, we feel we would need some rules in place because we're not sure everyone plays responsibly in the market. We are a company that are choosing by our own design to be responsible. And because we know how powerful our models are, and we know they can be used past the initial intention that we had and actually produce results that might become very dangerous and come under the high risk umbrella. And therefore, we feel that no matter how much responsibility we exercise ourselves in a let's say free environment, we need some rules also for us as general purpose providers. I was surprised for that because of course there are other developers of general purpose that say no, don't touch us. So again, there's been a very mixed bag, but the actual understanding of the need for rules is there. And as I said, of course, they want precision. Of course, they want standards. They say, don't let us interpret, don't let our engineers interpret basically legal rules, as it happened with the GDPR, which was not followed by standards and gave a lot of headaches to quite many companies that didn't know exactly how to interpret certain rules. And that's why I said at the beginning, and I say it all the time in such conversations, the work that will have to be done once we are finishing the text, once we are finalizing our legal definitions in the AI Act, the work that will have to be done at standard setting level is fundamental for giving that certainty and for translating that legal lingo into technical lingo so that engineers in companies big or small can understand what they need to do with their code and with their applications. Yeah. So again, overall, a positive feedback with reservations on the side of startups and SMEs. They are the most critical. And again, I'm not surprised by that because they are also the ones that suffer the most whenever there are new rules in place, because compliance costs and compliance burden is something that for a company of 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 people is not simple. It's not easy. No. It adds costs, it adds responsibility, which for a small company is not simple to bear. And therefore, sometimes I found that they don't even take too much time in understanding what the text is. They simply see yet another legislation, we hate it. So that's where I think there's also a duty of explaining, and this I think is also generally applicable because of the implications of this text, because of its complexity. There will be a duty for us to do as much public communication as possible, as much explanation as possible so that we are going past the initial apprehensions and perceptions to a level of actual deeper understanding of what the text implies.
Yeah, yeah, I think this is, there are mixed reactions. It's the same we also had when we talked about it in various places. And here in Munich, for example, we have a lot of startups that are working in the area of AI, and the reaction there is indeed rather cautious, I would say. And in Germany in particular, also we have this very strong structure of the economy in terms of SMEs. We have a lot of them, and there are a lot of worries there that this will affect them in particular, and maybe also the way that the new act would be interpreted in Germany, because in Germany, historically speaking, legal texts have often been interpreted in a very strict way, different from other countries. So, how do you see a problem here, or do you have a worry here in this?
Absolutely. For me, this is why I mentioned earlier in my intro the importance of governance, because I see this risk. I open a bracket here. I was recently in Warsaw and I visited an SME hub in Warsaw that was hosting quite a diverse set of companies. Some of them were startups, some of them were scale-ups, some of them actually quite big platform like Allegro. You might be familiar with, quite a powerful marketplace already in Eastern Europe. And there were some companies that were developing drones. And I asked them, listen, what's your biggest worry right now? Is it competition from China? Because as you said yourself, I'm also sitting in the Security and Defense Committee, and there we are quite worried with the market share of Chinese drone companies, many of them used to inspect our critical infrastructure, and that raises security concerns. So anyway, I thought, well, probably he's going to tell me something about the China competition. I said, no, I don't have necessarily a problem with the Chinese competition, because I can actually live with that competition. Actually, I can actually produce a model and a product that is better than theirs. My problem is that there is an EU regulation on drones, and not even that is my problem. The problem is that regulation is then interpreted in 27 different ways. And it's not only that I have to produce a manual that is 300 pages to explain how my drone works, but I have to do that manual in about 10 different models, because there are 10 different interpretations between member states on the same type of manual that is coming under the EU regulation. That is a reality that, if we don't find a solution to, is going to continuously undermine the competitiveness of our companies, particularly the smaller ones, the SMEs, as you rightly said. And that is why also, at least with this act, and honestly, I'm hoping that this can also become a model for other pieces of legislation, we have to find ways to bring uniformity to how member states will understand, interpret, and apply the rules. Because again, otherwise, we're going to put companies in silos, and instead of capitalizing on the whole of the EU market and really have a fair chance of being competitive out there, because that's what they want. They don't want things for free or for granted. They are not afraid of the competition on the basis of the quality of their products. They're afraid of actually the costs of accessing at least the European market, because once you can access that successfully, that whole market, then you can be competitive also globally. So I think that's where we have to be really paying attention, and that's why, for me, getting the governance right to make sure that you have that possibility to ensure a uniform application is key.
Yeah. Okay, so this is something that I understand that you have been addressing with the recent changes in the text as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions here. I will try to take at least some. There's the question, what regulation will there be around data quality for data used in machine learning, especially in healthcare, but also, for example, artist work being used for AI-generated images without consent?
Well, we've had ourselves quite a debate. The council, I understood, also had quite a debate on the initial proposal of the Commission to have data sets free of errors. And there was very spontaneous, almost feedback coming out of the industry that this thing doesn't exist. A data set that is completely free of errors and something that would become like a guarantee. So in order to be compliant, you would have to have data set that this doesn't exist in practice. Just as in the physical world, we are a world that is full of imperfections. The idea is to try as hard as you can. It's a due diligence in a way effort to do the best you can, that what you feed to the machine in terms of data sets is something that is as accurate as possible. So I think that with that understanding, both in the Council, if I look now at the proposal of the Council that has also moved away from the idea of free of errors data sets and now working on the concept of accuracy, we are having exactly the same discussion and the same evolution in our debate here in Parliament. We have also already moved away from free of errors data sets and to something that is again done on the basis of due diligence. And I'm also very aware, I was speaking of critics, I think one of the most critical sectors to this regulation of all of them is the medical and medical device sector, by far. Also, because they're also an already heavily regulated sector. Yeah. There are already quite a number of very precise sectoral regulations that are already imposing quite a number of conformity assessments and checks and this and that. And they see the AI Act as coming on top of all that and creating yet an additional burden. And my message is that we are very much aware of that. We're not going to do what, in fact, the sector asked, which is to carve out it completely from the text. That we cannot do. And I hope you'll understand that this cannot be done. But we are very much aware of this, and we are trying to make sure that whatever conformity would need, or a company in this sector would need to do for the AI part of a product, for the AI that is embedded in a medical device, would be something that is complementary and using already or built into the conformity assessments that are already coming out of other pieces of sectoral legislation. So again, we are aware of that and trying to fix it.
Okay, thank you. This is a question that you covered, but I think you said about, do you have an expectation when the Act will go into law?
End of next year, and then again, I anticipate somewhere between 1 year and 2 years for the entry into force.
Yeah. Here is a question about the societal aspects. One of the critiques of the draft was that it was not much society-oriented. Is there more attention to societal aspects within the changes proposed by the Parliament and the Council?
Well, others are saying that there is too much society in there. So, as always, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and our duty is to find the balance between these two different, let's say, camps. I think that already a lot of the initial approach of the Commission was, as I was saying, I don't want to repeat myself, was very much based on looking at the values that are part of our society. It is because we looked at the societal impacts, implications of AI, that we actually produced this regulation in the first place. So I would say that it's quite unfair to say that the text is not looking at the impacts on society. Now, of course, we have to make sure that we are capturing all the relevant aspects. And for example, I thought that what was missing in the initial proposal of the Commission was the impact on democracy, on political and electoral processes. Because again, if we look at the very potent social media algorithms that are accelerating certain type of content and then the implications that it has, there are rules that we can put in here that are complementing the DSA, which is already coming up with quite strong rules on responsibility for content for social platforms, so that again we are ensuring that technology is not used to accelerate processes that are undermining our democracy and our political processes. And therefore we have added, I have in my amendments, or already in the first draft of the report, I have added these elements in the text to complement this sort of impact on society.
Is there something like a feedback loop foreseen for, I mean, after the act comes into force and after we might have learned it and maybe things turned out differently than we expected? Is there something that could be expected to learn from this and make changes again?
Well, two points to make here. One is governance and the second one is remedies. I come back to governance and why it's so important. It's not important also because of the innovation and everything else that I was saying there, and uniformity and all that. It's also important because it is an opportunity to bring much more than we did with other pieces of legislation, by the way. It is important to bring all views from all parts of society to the table of the decision makers, and not only as some sort of an afterthought kind of a process where once in a blue moon you organize a conference and you bring in stakeholders and you take some notes and then you go back in the Commission Ivory Tower and you do or do not follow what you heard. But what we're trying to do right now is to introduce a structural process in the way the governance would work, where stakeholders would have a constant presence and could constantly bring in that reality check. It's that loop that you mentioned. How do you make sure that you constantly know what happens out there with the effects of your legislation? Both for the ones that are working and developing AI companies, but also for the ones impacted by AI, for the users, for the civil society out there, for the academia that is constantly developing concepts, thinking, looking at the impacts of AI. So all these actors, from my point of view, and again, that point of view is now becoming mainstream in the way we devise the governance, should be there structurally in the board. And for that purpose, we're creating an advisory part of the management board for the AI office, which will sit there permanently with presence from industry, from civil society, from academia, from trade unions. So basically, all groups that can bring in input to how AI is actually working in practice. So that's the element of governance. And of course, very importantly, that feedback, constant feedback, would then be used both for the decisions that the board would take, in those cases where it ensures uniformity in the application, but also in how the text would be adapted using that comitology procedure for the annexes that I mentioned earlier. Then the second element is remedies. We have introduced something that the Commission hasn't foreseen at all in the initial proposal, which is remedies for the actual users. And we have just 2 days ago, we had another political shadows meeting, and we have just also agreed to include in there the possibility for basically representative actions. So not only an individual redress for the individual consumer or end user that might be affected by AI, because sometimes citizens might feel very alone and isolated in their attempt to seek redress. But we are also introducing the possibility of representative structures that would be, again, a class action model that will bringing forward, collecting views and feedback, and then bringing them forward to seek redress.
That's very interesting, and I have to say I find it interesting that you also see the problems about GDPR, and it's something that you might want to avoid here. I think it will be important to see how this can be a not self-learning system, not unsupervised, but it's a kind of supervised learning system, in particular if it turns out that maybe that in certain sectors we might need some changes. I mean, this is a question that has come up in the chat also about the high risk, the definition of high risk. What would include high risk? Is there also something that would allow for flexibility or later changes in this in these areas?
Well, the definition itself or the criteria, I think, will need to be fixed. At least that's my view right now. And again, we'll see eventually. We haven't yet started that debate in Parliament. This is the next one in line. So next week at the next Shadows meeting, that's exactly what we're going to discuss. And I'm still getting my head around the actual text that I'm going to propose for the discussion. And it is so late because it is such a delicate balance to find, and such, as I said, the council has decided to run away from that responsibility altogether and simply said the commission will do that via an implementing act. I don't want to run away from it, understanding that is difficult. But my view right now, at least, we'll see how it's influenced also by my other colleagues. My view right now is that we will need some sort of a definition, let's say definition, that we will need something in the actual text, in the body of the text, or something that will remain, well, not fixed, because even the regulation can be amended, but it's something that is a bit much more stable than an annex, basically, that would be giving a definition of actually what high risk is, and some, let's call them criteria, some clear criteria as to how do you actually understand and how do you find it high risk. And then you would have the annex 3 with even one extra level of precision, I hope, in the definitions of those use cases. And the combination of these two elements, and that will of course be adaptable. The combination of a fixed set of criteria with an adaptable list of applications, well precise, I'm hoping that will achieve the purpose of being very clear and certain about what is and what is not high risk.
Nice, thank you. I mean, there was especially a lot of concern about AI in the educational sector being included in this. And while there may be certain arguments for it, there are also strong arguments that I've heard against including this. Yeah, okay. So I understand you are aware of that problem. So we have maybe time for one more question. Although, yeah, maybe this is a question because the most important aspect for me of all, and for my institute as well, is that you said it yourself. How do we create trust in the new technology? And without the trust, I mean, users will not use the systems. I think this is something that companies recognize. Companies come to us and say, well, we need to do something about this. We need to establish trust in our systems. And can that be an asset in competition, in worldwide competition, can be an asset for Europe? I would give you the opportunity maybe for some final words about this. So would this be an asset in a benefit for Europe in international competition with other areas of the globe?
Well, I certainly hope so, and I think that's one of the important elements in this rule book of AI, and why it is important to be the ones writing the rule book, because whether companies outside Europe again like it or not, we are a big market, and whatever the rules of this market are is important. As I said, we don't necessarily have to do it with the arrogance of just writing the rules and then dumping them on everybody else and thinking and hoping that they would be comply with them. We have to do an exercise of diplomacy as well, and reach out and trying to ensure convergence through every means we can. But again, at the end of the day, we are going to write the rules as we think they need to be written, according to our understanding, our values, and the feedback from our societies. And then again, companies out there or in here will have to comply with them if they want to play in this market. And I think that is indeed an element of competitiveness as well for the companies here, or for the companies that will choose to play by these rules, because again, that trust that you mentioned, that respecting rules will give, because again, people will be looking at these rules and saying, listen, if you have gone through this and in an area of high risk you have actually achieved compliance, well, then I really can trust this product, and I can actually use it as part of my services, or I can use it as part of the products that I'm building, and I know that I can get also a market advantage by saying that I am using this sort of product that is somewhat, let's say, certified, and that brings that. So trust, I fully agree with you, is an integral part of it, and an integral part of the competitiveness that I'm hoping that we would be achieving also with this text. So overall, convergence is key, but again, supporting competitiveness in Europe is equally important.
Thank you very much. We are almost out of time. I want to take a final moment once again to thank Dragos for accepting IEAI's invitation and all of you for joining us and contributing to the discussion with your questions, comments, and remarks. For more information about these and other events, please visit our webpage and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thank you very much.